Rumour has it the 80s were a good time. MTV was launched, Michael Jackson was at his absolute peak with Thriller and his Bad World tour, as was Madonna. Teen flicks became the most popular genre in movies at that time, so we're talking The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Footloose. Horror was also popping too with Poltergeist and Nightmare on Elm Street. Gaming computers finally became a thing, like yes, we love that. But of course bad things happened too, like the AIDS epidemic, famine in Ethiopia, a shit ton of violence in the Middle East, the Tiananmen Square protests, the war on drugs, and so on. What is up you guys? Hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host Ayman Hasan and welcome back to another video. Today we are diving into the top 10 scary urban legends from the 80s. Starting us off with number 10 is CROPSEY. Kids growing up in Staten Island during the 80s had probably been told the story of CROPSEY over and over again. Legend has it this boogeyman lived in the woods and would disembowel kids at night. Kids would go crying to their parents at night scared of the boogeyman, and they would assure them that don't worry kids, he's not real. But he was. Andre Rand was a weird man. He once randomly picked up 11 kids from a YMCA in a school bus, fed them, and then took them to an airport in New Jersey without any of their parents knowing. No one was hurt, but he still went to prison for 10 months for just being an absolute creep. Fast forward to 1981, 7-year-old Holly Ann Hughes fails to come home after going to the store with her friend. Andre pulled up to the duo and pulled Holly into his car and drove off, and eyewitnesses confirmed it. 1983, 11-year-old Thais Jackson goes missing. 1984, 20-year-old Hank Gaffario goes missing, and despite him being slightly old, he was described as not the smartest. Finally, in 83, Jennifer Schwager goes missing as well. Eyewitnesses saw her with Andre last before finding her body a month later. By 1988, Andre is charged with her kidnapping and murder, but only convicted with the former. Sentenced to 25 years in prison, he would have been free in 2008 had he not been convicted with kidnapping Holly as well. He'll finally be released in 2037 unless he of course dies of old age before that. So yes, the legend of CROPSEY was real. It was Andre. Coming in at number 9 is Satanic Panic. Originating in the US during the 80s, people were shitting themselves over the possibility that satanic ritual abuse was happening and involved physical or sexual abuse of an individual for the greater good or evil of a satanic ritual. The publication of Michelle Smith's book Michelle Remembers details how she believes satanic rituals involved sacrificing children. The book gained a lot of media success, which led to a bunch of new mandatory reporting laws and child protection across the world. Then in 1983 came the McMartin preschool trial, which contained allegations of children being hurt in satanic ritual abuse at a daycare. Soon after, 100 other preschools across the country were investigated based on similar allegations. So moral panic of the devil was super heightened during the 80s, and I feel like people still fear the devil now. I mean, I say not today Satan almost every single day, so I'm pretty much protected, so joke's on you. Number 8, we have the MONTAUK project. This was supposedly a series of classified US government experiments that took place at Camp Hero or Montauk Air Force Station. The reason behind the project was trying to find a way to develop psychological warfare techniques, experiment on children, open portals to other dimensions, and just dabble a little in time travel. Stories about the project have circulated since the 80s, and the main fuel came from Preston Nichols, who claimed to have uncovered repressed memories of his own involvement. He also claimed he is routinely abducted by the government against his will so they can do God knows what to him. Nichols came out with the MONTAUK Project series where he exposed what all goes on, including apparently the faking of the moon landings. Fun fact, TV show Stranger Things was actually inspired by the MONTAUK Project, so much so that Montauk was going to be the show's name. Can you imagine? It just doesn't have the same ring. Stranger Things. Montauk. It's just not. It's not. No. Filling at number 7 slot is SLAVEMASTER. Remember when you got chainmail or spam in your inbox like multiple times a day, and ironically it was always from your friends because the email said something like, oh, if you don't forward this to 10 of your contacts, your love life will be horrible for the next 10 years or some shit like that. I remember the days. But nowadays they are replaced by spam emails from companies' mailing lists that you don't even remember ever subscribing to. Literally during my lunch break I just go through my emails and unsubscribe because I'm like, dude, stop spamming me. Either way, around the year 2000 a lot of people got a scary chainmail warning them about an AIM user called SLAVEMASTER. He was meant to be a serial killer that lured women to his house after talking to them in these chat rooms. The chainmail varies in what the guy's username was. Sometimes it was Sweet Cali Guy Forever or Monkeyman935. Serial killer and all-around crook John Edwards Robinson started his spree of murders in the 80s in Kansas City. His modus operandi involved trolling online BDSM communities, and do you know what his username was on those sites? SLAVEMASTER. Two of his victims' bodies were found on his property in 2000, and he was finally convicted in 2002. Goodbye! I know there's a lot of talk about the 2000s in that one, but I mean, he did start committing crime in the 80s, so it's technically an 80s urban legend. Ha! Now at number 6 is Stairway to Heaven. This popular song by Led Zeppelin was released towards the end of 1971, but it took until 1982 for it to gain a lot of attention, but for the wrong reasons. Television evangelist Paul Crouch announced on the Trinity Broadcasting Network that the song contained satanic lyrics if you played the song backwards. The message can be found during the line, "If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now." When played backwards, it's meant to say, "Here's to my sweet Satan, the one whose little path would make me sad, whose power is Satan. He'll give you 666. There was a little tool shed where he made us suffer. Sad Satan." Surely not all of that came from that little sentence that I said prior. Either way, the band itself has ignored these claims, and their record company even said, "Dude, our turntable's only playing one direction, and that is forward." Regardless, this was a huge urban legend from the 80s, because even I heard it nearly 20 years later when I was born. I still hear about it now, and it's 2020. But funnily enough, I've never actually heard the song. LOL. Coming in at number 9 is Buckling Up. I legit thought this was fake, but apparently it's 100% true. Up until 1984, no one was legally required to wear a seatbelt while they were in a car. The law in the States was that seatbelts had to be included in personal vehicles, but they weren't mandatory to wear. My parents constantly remind me to wear my seatbelt anytime I'm in a car. I feel like that's one of the first important life lessons you get taught, so I can't even imagine that there was a time you didn't do it and it was seen as completely fine. Not dangerous, just optional. Do you hear that? I'm atting my parents for that one. There was a time you were in a car without wearing a seatbelt. Although I don't advertise this at all. Always wear a seatbelt no matter what. Always. This has been a PSA. At number 4 is Michael Jackson. Okay, Thriller. This one is low-key funny, but in the 80s and 90s there was this urban legend that had people believing that Michael Jackson was the same person as his sister LaToya Jackson. And honestly, I do get why people believed it. I know siblings looking similar is very common, but they looked uncannily identical. It was very creepy. There have been times where I've seen paparazzi pictures of LaToya wearing a hat and I thought it was Michael Jackson. I mean, that was obviously before his death. Now there's no mistaking it, and the legend is clearly false, but it spread so quickly that LaToya was actually asked about it in an interview back in 1988. She said, "I've always been a very big supporter of Michael's career. We've always been there for each other, but we are definitely not each other." Case closed. Filling at number 3 slot is Andy Kaufman. The famous actor-comedian was known for playing the character Foreign Man on the show Taxi in the late 70s, early 80s. Unfortunately, he died in 1984 at the age of 35 due to lung cancer. His death certificate says 1984, but Andy also routinely spoke of faking his own death as a massive hoax or prank, so people didn't know whether to believe he had actually died. There was also a rumor that Andy was gay and was one of the first people who died of AIDS, but that it was hidden from the public. In 2013, Andy's brother Michael was at a comedy club and got a letter that was apparently from Andy, and it said that he had had a daughter that was born in 1989. After his supposed death. After investigating the claim, Michael disclosed that it was fraud and that he is truly dead. He's apparently also been seen after his death multiple times, and I feel like faking your own death isn't uncommon. People think Elvis and Tupac did it too, so I mean. Now at number 2 is the real parentage. Unless you live under a rock, then you have probably heard of a little family called the Kardashians. The mega-rich group has overcome scandal after controversy, after 72-day marriages, and after not paying Bangladeshi workers for making their products. Kylie, you're a billionaire, pay your workers. Sorry, there was something stuck in my throat. I think it was called The Rich Exploiting the Poor. But one urban legend never seems to leave the family alone, and that's the true parentage of Khloe, who was born in 1984. In a 2009 episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Khloe asks her mum Kris if she's adopted, and her mum says no. And I can see why she'd ask. Other than the big ass, all her features are slightly lighter and a bit different to her sisters. A maternity test proved Kris was telling the truth, but that doesn't mean people thought Robert Kardashian was the father. Now if you're unaware, Robert was a lawyer and was friends with and represented OJ Simpson while he was on trial for murdering his wife and supposed lover. People thought OJ was Khloe's real dad, and Chris was like, absolutely not. I did cheat on Rob, but that was after Khloe was born and it wasn't with OJ. I'm not sure if that's meant to help her case, but it certainly doesn't make her look good. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying look at pictures of OJ's daughter Sydney next to pictures of Khloe, and then make your own assumption, make your own conclusion. I'm not gonna say anything. And finally, at number 1 is Natalie Wood. The Golden Globe actress was in movies like Rebel Without a Cause, West Side Story, and more. Her personal life was quite complicated. She was married to actor Robert Wagner, then they got divorced, then she married producer and screenwriter Richard Gregson. They divorced 3 years later, and then she remarried Robert. Either way, what was even more complicated were the circumstances surrounding her death. In November of 1981, Wood was filming the movie Brainstorm and was having a relaxing weekend boat trip to Catalina Island. Here are the people that were present at the time. We have Robert, since it was his yacht, Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain Dennis Davin. At 8 AM on the 29th, authorities discovered Natalie's body a mile away from the boat. The first suspected cause of death was accidental drowning and hypothermia, but we don't really know how true that is. Firstly, the autopsy results indicated she had bruises all over her arms and body and an abrasion on her left cheek. Now, how do you get those injuries during drowning? The night before, Wood and Wagner had a fight because Wood and Walken were getting flirty, and that made Wagner incredibly jealous. Apparently she had tried to board a dinghy to leave the yacht but slipped while in the process, which again doesn't make sense. She was terrified of water her whole life, she couldn't swim, and she was drunk. Witnesses heard a woman screaming for help that night, and Wagner wouldn't let Dennis turn on the searchlight. So what happened to Natalie Woods that night? We'll never know. And that is it for today's video, guys. I love urban legends. I feel like we should do it like yearly, you know, 1983, 1984, that may be too niche and too specific, but I mean, I could be cool. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Are you an 80s kid? Let us know. What was your favorite part of the decade? As always, I'm your host, Ayman Hasan, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, sheeple!